go. Hello, I'm Phil. This is Discover Tai Chi for LimbPower. It's Thursday, the 15th of August. Oh my goodness, the year is flying by. Let me pin myself so we can get a bigger screen image for you guys. If you haven't already, I think most of you are very familiar with the online video world. Yes, you're all muted. We'll get started. Okay, let's move my seat out of the way. I will use it in a little while, but I'm going to start standing. Okay, let's get moving. I'm going to start from the head down a little bit just to kind of tune ourselves in. So it's a little look down to the ground and then a look up to the ceiling or to the sky if we think about the sky. Simple looking up and down. But feel free to let the rib cage lift a little when we look up, and feel free to let the rib cage depress a little on the look down so that there's a little bit of a bend in the upper part of the spine or the back as we do so. Just to begin to mobilize. Just pay attention to actually just how much the movement of the head impacts our balance. We have to do quite a bit of adjustments, whether we're seated or standing. Muscles have to engage, otherwise we would quite simply fall over, wouldn't we? The head is that heavy, it would topple us over. We're going to do the same by going to the left and right. Don't worry which side you choose, but let the shoulders lift on each consecutive tilt to each side. So again, it's not just the head. The spine is getting a tilt as well. And again, you'll probably notice, again, whether you're seated or standing, just how much pressure comes to bear on the respective side that the head is tilted. Again, it's a heavy old thing. We don't really notice because it's conveniently attached to our bodies. Woe betide if it becomes detached. But this is useful just to really help us understand. Here we go. But there's a poorly translated word in the Chinese text that tends to get translated as alignment. It's a word that kind of describes being upright. Trees are often used as an analogy, or tall, growing up from the ground, but it often gets translated simply as alignment, i.e. aligning head over shoulders, shoulders over hips. If we're standing, hips over feet. If you're seated, then it's hips over the seat, isn't it? You're balancing in your seat even if you use the chair back. So that's going to be the focus for today. I've got you tuned into head position. And we're going to see if we can imagine that we're going to use that head as a building block on the very top stack of two more building blocks, one being the torso, the other being our legs or our seat, okay, whichever. And we want to see if we can keep this top building block, our head, just neatly centered so that our balance can be equalized left and right, forwards and back. So let's start off just doing so with Qi Shi. But just see if you can have a focus on that sense of, shall we say, alignment? I don't want you to think of that word in terms of holding yourself. If you were to think of three building blocks, one stacked on top of the other, if they are stacked neatly, they just remain in balance without having to do anything. And we want to try and conjure the same sensibility with our head on top of our shoulders. Let's open that movement out because that's going to change the dynamic as we open the hands. And then we've got the base of our stack of building blocks being our legs or our seat. In Chinese, certainly within Tai Chi and other sort of Chinese martial contexts, we talk about the legs as Dang in Chinese, D-A-N-G, which translates as bridge. So the legs or your seat, if you're sat down, are considered a bridge that carries everything else above it. Torso, shoulder girdle, upper limbs, and finally head and neck. Lovely. We're going to add a little bit more to the dynamic, and we're going to sweep our hands to one side. I'm going to my left, and we're just looking in that direction. It's a gesture, and then we're sweeping the hands to the other side. So now you begin to notice that shifting all of that mass in terms of our hands and arms from one side to the other requires us to stabilize through the torso, down into our bridge created by our legs or by our seat. And it requires this alternation of tension and release in the torso as we sweep the hands from one side to the other. So a very simple little Qigong exercise gives us quite a bit of information about our relative stability. Okay, just have a little rest. If you're standing up with me, just kind of move on your feet, on your legs. If you sat down, like we've done before, just move in your seat if you can. Again, helps us begin to understand how weight can shift, whether we're seated or standing. Okay, so that gets us going. So let's use some movements from the Qigong set, the 8 strands of brocade. So first movement, 2 hands hold the sky. Very much helps us think about this sense of alignment or stacking of building blocks, because we're not actually going anywhere apart from lifting our hands overhead. Here we go. I'm going to pick the hands up. We're going to turn them over, and then it's a press upwards as we look, and we let the rib cage lift, and then we simply let the hands fall away to either side. If you sat down, you may have to negotiate arm rests, so do that, and then once again we can go again. But as we lift, just get a sense of how you have to adjust things for that change as the hands go overhead. That again is a lot of mass that needs controlling. So it's a very good test of dynamics, stability and balance as we do so. Could be a breath in, followed by a breath out as we sung, relax, let the shoulders drop. Let's go one more time. So there we go. Everything's stacked one on top of the other. Again, here we go. You can have just a little bit of movement and relief. So let me sit down. I'll do this as we go through, just to demonstrate. So the next movement in 8 strands of brocade. So again, I sit on my seat and I immediately gain some stability because now I've got my seat, which is quite literally, this one is a box, so it is quite literally a building block upon which I'm seated. and then everything is stacked on top, torso, head and neck. So I'm just finding a sense of balance within that base that I've got created by, got my legs that happen to be connected to the ground as well. So that even gives me more support. So let's do archer. We're going to release some arrows. So let's go to the left. So we're going to cross our hands. I've got my right hand on the outside. I'm going to draw a bow, looking to the left, pulling with the right hand, pushing with the left. And as I get to full draw, I release that arrow and balance out that movement with the right hand, and then relax. Once again, got to pass my knees because I'm sat down, bringing up the left hand now because we're drawing to the right. Look to the right, draw your bow, let the arrow release, and again we balance out that release with that extension of that drawing hand, and then we come back to where we started. Right hand on the outside, looking to the left. Draw the bow. Think of the shoulders, chest, upper back, doing the work. If you've ever done archery, you'll know what I mean. We could also have a breath in. That will help support the shoulders as we take a breath in. And then we can breathe out as we release the arrow like a trigger. The breath becomes the means by which we release each arrow. So it could be a breath in. And it's an interesting aside that when people have recreated horse archery from Mongolia all the way across to the European steppes into Hungary, they realized that this drawing movement followed by the release and the balance of this hand going out to the side is necessary, because if you're riding a horse at full gallop, that balance of the release of the arrow with that opposite hand keeps you firmly in your saddle. I thought that's an interesting aside. So just nice, smooth drawing of the bow. I'm going to do one more because we've done a few, but sometimes it's nice just to get into a rhythm with a particular movement, because it just begins to take on a life of its own almost. So again, if you're standing, have a bit of a movement break. If you're sat down like me, see if you can shift some weight from one hip to the other, just to gain some pressure relief. Okay, let's move back into rotation. I'll stay seated again for this one. Again, these are going to be some variations on Wise Owl. So first of all, let's just do Wise Owl as we know it, which is a turn to the right. And as we do so, we lift the palms, not too high, just to facilitate that turn, and then we bring everything back to where we started. Same on the left side, make a turn, lift the hands and arms, not too high, just below shoulder height, and then gently back again. Again, you'll notice just how the hands and arms act as a balance for each other. And we're rotating our stack of blocks on top of the base that we create with our legs or with our seat. We get some rotation in. I'm going to do one more to the left, and then we'll do a little variation, because there's a number of variations to all of these movements. So again, some of you will be familiar where we just gesture with both hands on the same side. is a variation on that. So as I turn to my right, I'm going to be lifting my right hand in a familiar fashion that we've already done. But my left hand is simply going to come across and take hold of my right hip. So it comes across, but it's just a lift of the right arm. And then drop back. My right hand goes across to my left hip as I lift the left arm. And again, that might just give you a bit more range of motion and a bit more support as a consequence of having that light kind of brace created by the hand coming across to the opposite side. See how that feels as we go from right to left. So you may find that that just gives you a bit more range of motion simply by bringing the opposite hand across, but to have it in a settled position on each respective hip or thigh. Lovely. So there you go. There's another variation. Again, seated or standing, just bringing my hand across. Again, there's lots of variations that kind of spin off or permutate from these ideas, but that gives us just a little extra so we can use Wise Owl in its initial form to just get moving, and then we could use one of these progressions to give us a bit more rotation if that's what we're looking for. Okay, I'm going to stand up, join people standing again. Have a little move on the spot if you need to. Okay, so now we're going to challenge ourselves a bit more with a bit more of a dynamic movement called sway the head. So if we are stood up, we're going to see if we can increase the size of our base of support, increase the size of our bridge, basically, by widening our stance. Again, for people with higher levels of amputation, transfemoral amputations, people with bilateral amputations, this will mean different things for different people. So again, there's very much a case of you do you and find the sweet spot for where you feel comfortable. If you sat down, again, see if you can get yourself settled, maybe move a little bit away from the back of the seat if possible. We're going to place the hands on our hips. If you sat down, that might mean that the hands rest on tops of the thighs. Again, you will know your situation better than me. I'm turning to the right, and then I'm ducking my head down and sweeping it around to the left as if ducking under a rope or something, and popping back up on the left and recentering. So a big movement of the torso. And then I go back the way I came, turn to the left, duck down. Doesn't have to be too deep, because as soon as we shift that building block of our head and shoulders forward, all the muscles of the torso into the thighs and into the legs, even when we're sat down, are engaged. If you think of them like a set of pulleys and ropes, they all have to take up the slack as we allow our head to swing from one side then to the other. So again, it's a little examination in balance and stability. And as you go from one side to the other, you may find again that range of motion just begins to improve all by itself without us trying too hard to turn things into a stretch. I'm going to go one more time. Don't worry if we've ended up out of sync, that doesn't matter. But that is actually a very challenging movement. There we go. I'm going to walk my feet in. I know when I spent a long time in a wheelchair, when I came out of hospital, I had a few falls, either me and the chair altogether, or me coming out of the chair. Simply because I didn't have sufficient strength in my torso to keep me in it. It took a good long while for me to kind of redevelop some stability, doing some physiotherapy and doing some exercises at home. So this idea around giving us an opportunity to explore stability via the trunk really pays dividends in the long run. Okay, another movement where we're going to be bending forward. I'll do this a few times stood up and then I'll do it sat down. It's called hold the feet. Not that we necessarily have to, but we're going to lift a ball or a box or a balloon up overhead, looking up and letting the rib cage lift, and then we're slowly going to bring the hands down as if on top of that box or balloon, pushing down. So if we're stood up, hands can circle round to the backs of the thighs. If you are sat down, generally we like to say put your hands in your pockets, not literally, but on the sides of the thighs. And then we just slide the hands down as we take a bend at the hips and we take a bow. But we don't go too far, we just go within a comfortable range and then come back upright. Here we go again. So this lift overhead helps us get everything stacked. The rib cage is lifted a little. And then when it comes to the hinge forward, we can see if we can maintain our balance as we take a bow. So the trick to understand is, and this is a bit more difficult for when we're seated, is to think of the hips going backwards as much as the head comes forwards. Not necessarily literally, but certainly having that idea. We think about it, our head is attached to our tailbone. We've got all of this connecting us, including our spine. And there's a general rule that if one goes up, the other comes down. So if the head is dropping down, the tailbone or the hips are going to be elevated relative to that head position. Let's do it seated as well. But in order to balance that movement out, we need to think of the hips acting as the stabilizer. So as we lift up, we're getting nice and tall and long through the torso. And then as we come down, so for me, I'm sat down, so I'm going to bring my hands onto the sides of the legs. And then I'm taking a bow, letting my hands slide down, but I'm keeping a base of connection in my hips and pelvis as I do so, just to keep me connected to my seat. Here we go again, looking up, getting tall, bringing the hands down, just breathing comfortably with this movement, and then coming forwards, down, letting the hands trace their way down the legs, come around to the front, and then slowly back up. And again, if we don't try too hard, we'll go once more. We find that the range of movement begins to slowly increase. There you go, I've just about reached my ankles on that final go. But I started off kind of somewhere around my knees. Okay, let's keep going with a little bit of a movement break. Okay, so let's finish off with a couple more movements. Again, I'll do the next movement seated. It's a familiar movement. It's a push. We're pushing waves, but we'll do this push on either side. So we need to imagine that we've got the opportunity to place our hands in lovely warm water. I'm going to lift those hands up. I'm going to turn a little bit to my right, and I'm going to drop the hands in and take a push off in that direction. I'm going to bring the hands back and do the same to the left, a push. And again, in order to facilitate each push, we've got to stabilize ourselves in our seat or upon our feet as we do so. We just push, smooth waves from one side to the other, pushing and push. So we get some useful rotation, a bit of a stretch through at least one of the shoulders as we do so. On each side, I'm going to do one more each side. Last one. Fab. Pushing waves. We'll do one more movement. We'll do a variation on 4 directions. We'll do this one where we're crossing the center line with each hand on this set of diagonals. So once again, the idea is to stack your building blocks, starting with the base, so to speak, legs, seat, and then the torso, then the head. I'm going to pick up the right hand. We're pushing up to the left, so I'm looking in that direction and pushing up. And when I'm drawing that hand back, down, the same way it came. I'm going to let that hand rest. If you stood up, it just comes to the side. And now the left hand pushes up to the right. And then I draw that one back nice and slowly, back the way it came. So that's for upward diagonals. Take the right hand, we're now going down diagonally to the left, pushing. Again, that's going to create some rotation, but also a challenge to our trunk stability. And same with the left hand, down to the right, push. And then draw that hand back along the same line. Good job. Here we go. Right hand up to the left, looking in that direction. Draw the hands back. Left hand upwards to the right. Right hand, this time downwards to the left. Looking in that direction also. Bring that hand back. And finally, left hand down to the right. And then draw that hand back. 4 directions, but on these diagonals. A little bit different from our forwards to the sides, up and down. Okay. Right. Need to keep an eye on the time. We need to bring things to a little close. I'll stay seated, and where I am, we'll do a little familiar for some of you, little Tai Chi sequence, gather celestial energy, gather Earth's energy. I don't know, I've missed it, but there's been lots of spectacular skies, haven't there, over the past few days. If you've been lucky enough, you may have seen meteor showers, and you may even have seen the northern lights, and you may even have seen a combination of the two. If you were very lucky. I sadly didn't get a chance to see any of that. So let's have that idea. We're outside. It's night time. There's a starry sky. I'm going to bring my hands up for gather celestial energy. Just letting my hands alight for a moment. And then we're lifting up. Again, the rib cage lifts nice and tall as we look up to the sky. going to bring down some stars. Just breathing very comfortably. And gather up those stars. Could be a breath in. And then as we let the breath go, we simply let the stars fall away and off they fly. And then as we do so, we begin to pick the hands up to each side and we take the corner of a large blanket. It's called the blanket of the earth. We're going to wrap ourselves in the earth. Gather Earth's energy, as it's called. We're going to bring the hands around. We're going to touch the collarbones. We're going to take a breath in if we wish. And we simply let the blanket fall away as we let the breath go, like so. Then we're going to bring the hands around, link our thumbs, and let the hands rest right on the lap if you sat down. Lower abdomen and take a breath in. Close your eyes if you wish, or rest your eyes and just kind of gather everything that we've done and pack it away for the time being at least. And just have a little focus on the breath as it comes in and as the breath goes out, as we relax everything the breath goes. As we breathe in, it's a muscular event. Muscles of the rib cage and the diaphragm all contract and then they relax, and that's the out breath. One more time, and then we can part the hands. And that brings us to a close in our exploration of building blocks and base of support and this sense of alignment or stability with balance that is dynamic at the same time. Again, it represents another kind of yin-yang aspect, stability and balance. Two different things, but together they give us our posture and our poise and our ability to be upright, whether we're seated or standing. So I hope that's been interesting. I will come a bit closer, finish the recording. We will be back next week. If there's any questions or thoughts or comments,